Okay, it says, imagine a person with left-sided congestive heart failure that lives in Rexburg, Idaho. Fluid builds up in the lungs, and this causes the PO2 of the blood leaving the lungs to have a partial pressure of about 80. Which of the following statements about this scenario would be true?
So fluids build up in the lungs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the answers are, an ACE inhibitor would likely help this person. This person is likely to have at least 75% saturation but lower than normal PO2 in arterial blood. And this person may do better if they move to a location at sea level.
Okay. So those are kind of our answers. Okay. So let's go through this. So what's going on? They have, what's wrong with them first of all?
Fluid in the lungs.
They have fluid in the lungs due to left side of heart failure, right? So left side of heart failure, why does that put fluid into the lungs? Remember this whole?
Because the left side pumps.
So left side of the heart, right?
So that's.
It receives from the.
So it receives from the lungs.
It receives from the lungs, pulmonary veins. Good job.
So we can't pump it out, so it just fills up and then
It can't pump out.
Backtracks into the
Yeah,
lungs.
it backs up, right? It's like your plumbing. It just gets backed up and into these pipes, then into these big pipes called your lungs, right? And so then that fluid will start to just build up in the lungs. And so, if this is your lung, your alveoli, then you got fluid in here, and so that's making oxygen have to go through all this fluid, then this membrane, then through the capillary membrane, into the plasma, then onto the hemoglobin. It's a lot harder, right? And so does that make sense why their saturations get lower? Yeah? Okay, so they said his normal PO2 was what? Pulse pressure was at what? 80?
80.
80. Okay. Alright. So what was his oxygen saturations? Or the answer was 75%?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think that's possible? To have that based on that curve? Let's talk about this curve, right? So this is 100%. This side talks about the saturation on the hemoglobin, right? And then this side talks about the PO2 in the plasma. That's 104. So like, this would be like 40 is normally with what?
75?
What was considered like the O crab zone we talked about in class? Below
65?
65-ish, right?
65.
65, 70. Around here, it starts to get really steep, and there's not really much of a draw out. Maybe right there, I guess it'd be right there. Right? Okay, so do you think 40%, 40 PO2, is that a lot? No. Okay, so now think about this. In this graph we drew, remember this graph we drew? This graph, you guys remember this graph? And there's like the heart, and here's the heart. So that's the right side of the heart, left side of the heart, goes to the lungs, then comes up, goes to the tissues. Well, what was the PO2 in the tissues? 40, right? And it's coming into the, right? And then we got, over here is like 95, it pushes into there actually. And so 40 means we're at the same level as the tissues, right? If the PO2 is 40, the PO2 is 80, is that what you said? So the PO2 is 80, then can we still perfuse the tissues?
Yeah.
So we can still get oxygen into the tissues, okay, so we're pretty good. And so would it be possible for him to have 75% saturation? Do you think that's possible?
Yeah.
I think so.
I think it's possible, right? I mean, you have to look at the graph to really know it. But I'm pretty sure on the graph, he was saying that like 70 was right about here. And so if it was me, I would say no to that answer. Does he say that on the, what are the answers?
It's all of them.
All of them are correct? Yeah, because I thought in class he said that 70 was around 40, didn't he? In class?
It looks like it.
That's what it looked like to me when he drew it. But, and so that's just saying, like, if you look at this graph, look at 70, it'll just match up. So you just be able to match it up with the graph. But then, let's talk about this one down here. So, if he decreases his altitude, will he have a better lifestyle?
Yeah.
What will that do? Increase the partial pressure of oxygen. That makes sense, yeah. Okay. So you increase the partial oxygen, then it'll be easier to push through that, right? So you're pushing more. That's one of, what is that, Dalton's law? No, that's Henry's law. Partial pressure plus solubility is how much it goes in. Okay, so then what about ACE inhibitors? What does that do? What does an
comes
ACE
from the
inhibitor?
lungs.
Volume.
And then with like blood pressure.
It
ACE.
doesn't do with blood pressure, right? But what did the ACE do?
It like converted.
It converted two things, angiotensin 1, 2,
angiotensin 2.
and where did this happen at?
Kidneys.
Happens in the
Liver.
lungs, right?
Lungs.
Remember, angiotensinogen
What are those?
Yeah.
leaves from the kidneys and it gets turned into angiotensin 1, but then it goes to the lungs and the angiotensin converting enzyme, ACE, in the lungs, right? Converts to angiotensin 2, and then what does that do?
Increase blood volume.
It increases the blood volume, basically, vasoconstriction,
Yeah.
and it decreases your urine output, right? Remember that?
Yeah.
It'll increase your thirst, stuff like that too. And so if you have basically fluid volume overload and if fluid is building up into your lungs, right? And so if you're not able to get that fluid out of your lungs, well, decreasing, so then if you block this, your blood volume will go down, right? You'll increase your urine output, so these things actually make you pee a lot, right? You're gonna be peeing a lot more. And so does that mean that you'll be able to decrease the amount of fluid in the lungs maybe?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? How it'll maybe make it easier for you to get oxygen into the plasma?
And that would increase dilation, vasodilation, or decrease it.
That would probably cause it. If ACE causes vasoconstriction, ACE inhibitors would cause vasodilation, yeah.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I get it.
And so that's just lowering the whole point of ACE inhibitors is lower the fluid volume. They're just called diuretics. They make you pee a lot. Get rid of all the fluid that's building up in your body. Okay. And so that would also decrease the workload on the heart, right? And the heart doesn't have to pump as hard. And so if it's already in heart failure, you want to do anything you can to make the heart not pump as hard, have to work as hard, and not allow the blood to actually flow and not build up in the lungs. Okay, what was the other one? Decrease in PO2 because of altitude. What was the other answer?
It's like living at sea level or something like
That was the only, I think there was only 3, and then
There's
the other
3.
answer was all of the above.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense then. Yeah. That makes sense then, I guess.
Could we get some more practice questions with you?
Yeah.
Now we're looking for
And if you didn't have that graph and you couldn't say like for sure, is 75% really 80? You know, like 75% is like pretty much livable. I think in the reading he actually said like 60 to 100 is like considered like
65 to 100.
65 to 100, right? This is considered okay. So 80, that's pretty high. You know, you could probably guess. But if you knew the ACE inhibitors and the one were correct, then it has to be D only above. You know,
Right.
you can pretty much narrow that out. But yeah.